April 30th, 1945, Berlin. At 6:30 in the morning, the sky is darkened by the smoke of the Soviet bombings, which intensify every moment. In his bunker, 11 meters below the Reichstag gardens, Adolf Hitler meets with General Wilhelm Mohnke to ask him how long they can hold out. 1 day at the most is the blunt answer. A few hours later, the Führer lies in his office with a fatal pistol wound to his right temple. Next to him, his wife Eva Braun gives off the characteristic smell of bitter almonds, evidence of death by cyanide. Thus ended the delusional idea of forming a 1,000-year empire. Under the siege of the capital city, in the hands of an army motivated by the ghosts of 25 million compatriots, and a desire for vengeance that only the bloodiest war could conceive. But how were the last days of one of the most ruthless regimes humanity has ever known, and which seemed to be invincible? Join us in this new episode of Military History to relive the Battle of Berlin. Are you ready? Then prepare to travel back in time. During the first days of February 1945, Franklin Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin held a series of meetings known as the Yalta Conference. Among the agreements that would seal the future of the nations once the conflict was over, the division of Germany into 4 zones stood out, one for each ally and one for the Soviet Union. The Soviet leader wanted no one to know his intentions regarding Berlin. He hinted to Dwight Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of the Allies, that he had little interest in the city. And furthermore, he persuaded Roosevelt that his own general did not consider it tactically valuable. Eisenhower was obsessed with reaching Bavaria before the Nazis could reorganize in their mountainous strongholds, at the risk of extending the war. But what did Stalin really think? He was convinced that controlling the German capital would ensure the future dominance of Central Europe after the war. Also, he was eager to appropriate Berlin's atomic research laboratories and their uranium. And there was a desire for symbolic compensation for the 25 million dead in the Soviet Union. Stalin's strategy worked, and it was established that Berlin would remain in the Soviet occupation zone. Churchill saw this with suspicion and wrote a letter to Roosevelt on April 1st warning that if the Soviets conquer Berlin, it will create too exaggerated an impression, which will remain an overwhelming contribution and will be the cause of serious trouble in the future. With the most coveted trophy of the last years of conflict already secured, Stalin faced another dilemma. Who would carry out the decisive attack? Would it be the First Belarusian Front, commanded by Georgy Zhukov, the acclaimed savior of Stalingrad? Or would the honor go to the Ukrainian Front, under the command of Ivan Konev? The truth is that the Soviet dictator took a tactical license to create a kind of competition between the two marshals, a scheme that, as we'll see, paid off. This way, the Comintern deployed a total of 2,300,000 Soviet soldiers, 80,000 Poles, and 6,250 tanks, 41,600 guns, and 7,500 aircraft. Meanwhile, in the calm that preceded the storm, how was the Wehrmacht preparing? On March 20th, Hitler had appointed the defense to General Gotthard Heinrizi, a skilled strategist who anticipated that most of the Soviet troops would cross the Oder River, very close to the hills of the city of Silo. Heinrizi ordered the flooding of the plain between them and moved the units with the greatest firepower to the cliffs. The town of Silo was defended by young soldiers of the 9th Parachute Division, who had only 2 weeks of infantry training and no knowledge of ground combat tactics. The fierce final battle between Germany and Russia began on the eastern bank of the Oder River, 40 miles away from Berlin, at exactly 3 a.m. on April 16, 1945. Soviet artillery began a deafening barrage of 9,000 guns arranged side by side. In the light of dawn, the Soviet infantry, accompanied by their tanks, began to laboriously cross the marsh, allowing the German guns located on the hill to decimate the armored units. As if that was not enough, the dense dust from the bombardment scattered the light from the Soviet searchlights that, far from blinding the Germans, gave away the formations of the First Belarusian Front. 2 days before this brutal confrontation, Roosevelt died of a stroke. Faced with this unexpected event, Stalin became convinced that the Allies still wanted to get to Berlin before him. Annoyed by the delays at Silo, he applied his tactical scheme and gave Konev permission to capture the capital. Pressured by this, Zhukov hastened his advance at the cost of using up his reserves and losing 30,000 men. Finally, on the night of April 18th, the First Belarusian Front reached the last defensive line that Heinrizi had set. With the inexorable advance of the Red Army, the Wehrmacht deployed on the outskirts of the capital a total of 766,750 soldiers, 1,519 tanks, 9,303 guns, and 2,224 aircraft. At 10 a.m. on April 20th, the long, constant whistles and sirens raining down from above could only mean one thing. The preliminary attack by 1,000 Allied bombers had begun. By the end of the confrontation, about 85 or 90% of the center of the capital had been destroyed. However, the Nazi command organized a parade to celebrate the Führer's 56th birthday. It was his last public appearance, and he awarded medals for the fighting in the East. Thus, he placed a cruel hope in the devout fanaticism of the adolescents, almost children who made up the Hitler Youth. At the end of the day, another bombardment took the city by surprise. The absence of the characteristic whistles could only mean one thing: the artillery was close enough. By April 24th, Berlin was completely besieged. Was the battle in Berlin cruel? To get an idea, it's enough to say that the children and grandparents of the popular militias were ordered to turn the city into a German Stalingrad, which would be the grave of the Soviets. This is why they were armed with Panzerfaust, the bazookas known as Handstukas. The Red Army, on the other hand, used their 203mm B-4 howitzer, nicknamed Stalin's Sledgehammer, at point-blank range. Each house became a fortress. However, Germany had already lost all its allies, and the only support of the Waffen-SS remained, a body of fanatical foreigners made up of Danes, Swedes, Norwegians, Dutch, and Vichy French. The end seemed inevitable. The April 29th assault to seize the Reichstag failed. The Berlin artillery commander, Helmut Weidling, called on the troops to immediately stop the resistance. The order read, on April 30, 1945, the Führer committed suicide and thus abandoned those who had sworn loyalty to him. The general situation makes our further resistance meaningless. I order the immediate cessation of resistance. However, the fighting inside the building continued until May 1st. Taking Berlin and putting an end to the hideous Hitler regime cost the lives of more than 80,000 Soviet soldiers, 70,000 German soldiers, and more than 20,000 civilians. But finally, the red flag flew at the top of the Reichstag. However, with Stalin's takeover of Berlin, Churchill's great fear had become true. The Yalta Accords had been finalized, and the Cold War began. If you like the story of the Battle of Berlin, we invite you to share your opinion. Do you think the Allied strategy was correct? Could they have occupied Berlin alone, or would they have needed the help of the Red Army anyway? Leave us your comment below, and don't forget to subscribe and activate notifications to learn about many more military events that left their mark on history. Thank you very much for joining us, and until the next video.